Hi students, coming to the next topic in the subject object-oriented programming languages, default parameters. So what is this default parameters? It's a name itself is saying it is a parameters is nothing but a variables. That variables holds the default values. Default parameters you also call as an optional parameters. Optional parameters. Actually, a default parameter is a function parameter that has default values provided to it. So this is the definition of the default parameters. Default parameters is a function parameter that has default values provided to it. If the user does not supply a value to this parameter, the default value will be used. Okay, suppose the user is there. User didn't supply any provide. If the user doesn't supply a value to the parameters, okay, if the user doesn't supply a value to these parameters, the default value will be used. So whatever the default value will be there, that will be used. Okay, the default value will be used. Suppose if the user supplies a value for default parameters, if the user supply a value to these parameters, then the user supplied value is used instead of default value. So here if the user does not supply, it takes the default value. Suppose if the user supply a value to default parameters, then the user value will be taken. Value will be taken instead of default value. Is it clear? So actually the default parameters, if the user didn't supply any value, it takes some default values. Suppose if the user supplies a value, then it takes the user value instead of default value. So that is about the default parameters. Let us see one example. How these default values will be executed in the program. Void print value. So I am taking the arguments. So that is int x, int y is equal to 10. Okay. So here I taken a default value y is equal to 10. Now std is a class name. Cout print x value. Just I am giving the new line, means after printing the x value, it goes for the next line. See, std is a class name. Cout print the y value. Okay, so now the function is closed. Now coming to the main function, int main. So in this main I have to call the program. This function I have to be called. Like with the values I will call print value. Here I am supplying the values for these parameters, for these variables. Print 1 and print values 3, 4. So here I given one argument and here I have given two arguments, two values I had given. So what will be the output here? Okay, what will be the output? So first print value 1 means it prints the x value 1. So x is 1. Y I didn't provide any value. So I didn't give the y value. So it takes the default value, that is y is equal to 10. So for this print value, it calls this function, okay, and prints the x as 1 and prints y as the default value 10. Now it takes the next function, print value 3, 4. Now instead of taking the y value 10, it takes the user value. So these are the user values. So now the values will be x is equal to 3 and y is equal to 10. Sorry, y is equal to 4. Because we have to take the user value. Instead of the default value, if the user provides the values, it takes the user value instead of the default values. So this is the default parameters. So here what it's saying, here y will use default value, default parameter. So what is the default parameter here? The 10 will be print. Here y will use user value. So what will be the user value here? 4. So instead of 10, it prints the 4. So this is about this default values, default parameters. So if the user doesn't supply a value, then it takes the default value. If the user supplies a value, then it takes the user value instead of the default parameters. So let us see multiple default parameters. Here we have taken only two variables, x and y. Now let us take the multiple default parameters. Okay. So a function can have multiple default parameters. Let us see the example for this. The same example I am taking, but with multiple values. So void print values. So here I am taking int x is equal to 10, int y is equal to 20, and int z is equal to 30. So I'm giving, these are all the default values, default parameters. I have given 10, 20, 30. So these are not the user values. Means here in this function, whatever the values that you entered, that you call it as a default values. Now call the function std cout values. So print the x value. And I'm giving the space. So for space, you just print the space also. Y value. And again the space. Z value. And then new line. Okay. So this is a function print values. Now coming to the main program. So in the main program, we are just given function calls. I'm not writing the void main everything. Let us take int main. Now I am calling the functions print values. Here I am supplying the values, that is the user values 1, 2, 3. Again the print values. Now I am giving 1, 2 print values, 1 print value. I am not giving any values. Now let us see how the output will look. So what will be the output for this program? So the main thing here I am explaining is what is the default parameters and what is the user values. What is the default values and what is the user values. So default parameters means if you supply the in the program, if user doesn't give any value, it takes the default parameters. Okay. So output, first function print values 1, 2, 3. So it calls this function. Instead of x is equal to 10, y is equal to 20, z is equal to 30. Here the user given 1, 2, 3 value. So now the output is values 1 space 2 space 3 because I have given the spaces. I print the spaces also. Now coming to the next function, that is values. So what it takes, here only the two arguments is there. So 1, 2 is there. So now x value is 1, y value is 2, z is, it prints the default value, default parameter 30. Now coming to this function, values. So now what it prints, only one argument is there, means one value is given. So the leftmost value that will be here. So x is 1, y it takes the default value 20 and 30. So if the user doesn't supply any input, so if the user doesn't give any values, then the program will take the default parameters. So what are the default parameters now? It prints 10, 20, 30. Okay, so this is about the default parameters. But one thing you have to be noted, remember, while you are using the default parameters, some conditions are all default parameters must be the rightmost parameters. So whatever you are taken, okay, so whatever you are taken, that should be the rightmost. It is. So all default parameters must be the rightmost parameters. So what it means? All the default parameters must be rightmost. In the previous example, I had given one only the z value. So here I entered only the y value. Means all the default parameters must be the rightmost. You just only for the rightmost values you have to give the values. If you want, you can give the default parameters to both the values. If two variables are there, just give the for two variables, give the values. Otherwise, if you want to give only one value, if you want to give the only one default parameter, that you have to be remember that you have to give to the rightmost parameters. Suppose void print value int x is equal to 10 and int y. This is invalid. Why it is invalid? If you are giving only one variable a default parameter, so that should be rightmost parameter. So if you want to supply a 10 value, a default value, you have to give to the rightmost value. Here you have to give. So this is you cannot give to the leftmost value. If you are providing only one value. Suppose if you are providing two values, if int y is equal to 20, it's okay. Okay, if you are providing only one value, means first give to the rightmost value. So this statement is invalid. And another thing is, without supplying arguments, suppose if you are taking three variables x, y, z. So without supplying arguments for x and y, z will not hold values. If you want to supply, just give the default values to all the three variables. Okay, so without supplying arguments for x and y, z will not hold values. So z will not hold values. Okay, that means suppose if you are taking print values, so this does not exist in C++. Okay, so if more than one default parameter exists, the leftmost default parameter should be one most likely to be explicitly set by the user. So the leftmost bit parameter will be given explicitly. The user has to be given this parameter. The rightmost will take the default values. If the user didn't supply anything, if it is applying only one parameter, then he has to give to the user has to give to the value to the leftmost. So here also see here. So the user is providing the value to the leftmost. So just why I am creating here 1, 1, 1. The rightmost will be taken the default values. So that is the 30, 20, 30, 20, 30 like that. Okay. So this is about the default parameters. Thank you.